America, you don't know it yet, but you're going to Europe this summer on Pan Am.
Pan Am went bust.
Everything from things that we take for granted today, like air traffic control and different flight procedures, different ways of forecasting the weather, of flight planning. Pan Am was the first airline to fly around the world. They actually set a few different records about that. They were the first to fly from the US across the Pacific. It was really a lot. They launched this international service that really helped define what we have today as just regular air travel.
Imagine stepping onto a plane where the captain greeted you personally, where multilingual flight attendants served gourmet meals on fine china, and where flying felt less like transportation and more like joining an exclusive club. This was Pan Am, an airline that didn't just connect cities, it connected the world. For decades, those iconic blue and white jets with the globe logo represented the pinnacle of air travel. Then, on December 4th, 1991, it all came crashing down. The airline that pioneered international aviation, that introduced the jumbo jet era, and that carried presidents and movie stars across continents, simply ceased to exist. How does something so dominant disappear so completely? The story of Pan Am is more than just a business failure. It's the story of how yesterday's visionary can become tomorrow's relic. It all began in 1927, when a 28-year-old entrepreneur named Juan Trippe founded Pan American Airways with a simple mail route between Key West, Florida, and Havana, Cuba. But Trippe had no ordinary ambitions. He envisioned an airline that would make the world smaller, connecting continents and cultures in ways people had barely imagined. Through political maneuvering and business savvy, Trippe convinced the U.S. government to designate Pan Am as America's unofficial flag carrier for international routes. This gave the airline a virtual monopoly on overseas flights, while domestic routes remained off-limits. For Pan Am, the world was its playground, but America itself was forbidden territory. Throughout the 1930s, Pan Am expanded with breathtaking speed. The airline built routes throughout Latin America, then across both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. These weren't simple flights. They required massive flying boats called clippers that could land on water when airports didn't exist. The China Clipper made its first trans-Pacific flight in 1935, while the Yankee Clipper inaugurated transatlantic service in 1939. Pan Am didn't just fly to these destinations. It built the infrastructure to make them possible. The airline constructed airports, installed radio navigation systems, and established weather stations across continents. When World War II arrived, Pan Am's global network became invaluable to the U.S. military, flying millions of miles on behalf of the war effort while training thousands of pilots and mechanics. After the war, Pan Am entered what many consider its golden age. In 1947, Trippe launched the airline's around-the-world service, a crowning achievement that cemented Pan Am's reputation as the world's airline. The company employed 19,000 people across 62 countries by that year. Passengers experienced unparalleled luxury. College-educated flight attendants fluent in multiple languages served elaborate meals on white tablecloths, and the entire experience felt aspirational rather than routine. But Trippe was already thinking about the next revolution. In the 1950s, when most airlines were content with propeller-driven planes, he pushed American manufacturers Boeing and Douglas to develop commercial jet aircraft. Pan Am became the first U.S. airline to operate jets in 1958, slashing transatlantic flight times in half and forcing competitors to scramble into the jet age. Then came the gamble that would define both Pan Am's greatest triumph and, ultimately, contribute to its downfall. In 1965, Trippe approached Boeing with an audacious request: build a plane 2.5 times larger than anything currently flying. Boeing's president William Allen was reportedly skeptical, but the two men struck a legendary deal. Trippe agreed to order 25 aircraft for over $500 million if Boeing would build them. Boeing had to construct an entirely new factory in Everett, Washington, just to assemble these massive planes. The media warned that Allen was betting the entire company on this risky venture. The result was the Boeing 747, a behemoth that revolutionized aviation when it entered service with Pan Am on January 22, 1970. The jumbo jet's distinctive hump, massive size, and ability to carry hundreds of passengers fundamentally changed air travel. By dramatically lowering the cost per seat, the 747 made international travel accessible to middle-class families, not just the wealthy elite. It was Pan Am's vision realized: air travel for everyone. But beneath this triumph, cracks were forming in Pan Am's foundation. The airline had invested heavily in an enormous fleet of 747s, just as multiple crises converged. The 1973 oil embargo sent fuel prices soaring, making Pan Am's fleet of large, fuel-hungry aircraft increasingly expensive to operate. At the same time, all that overcapacity from multiple airlines buying jumbo jets created fierce price competition. Pan Am's high fixed costs, its decentralized international infrastructure, older aircraft, and premium service model pushed break-even points dangerously high. Unlike domestic carriers that could shift planes between routes as demand changed, Pan Am's international focus left it vulnerable to global economic swings. Everything changed in 1978 when the U.S. government deregulated the airline industry. Suddenly, competitors with extensive domestic networks could feed passengers directly into international flights. American Airlines, United, Delta, and others used their domestic routes to fill international planes, creating integrated networks that Pan Am simply couldn't match. The airline that had been barred from domestic routes for decades now desperately needed them. In 1980, Pan Am made a costly attempt to solve this problem by purchasing national airlines for over $1 billion. The integration proved disastrous, adding massive debt and operational complexity without delivering the domestic network Pan Am needed. The airline began hemorrhaging money. To survive, Pan Am started selling off the very assets that made it valuable. The company sold its landmark headquarters building above Grand Central Terminal, now the MetLife building, for $400 million. It sold the Intercontinental Hotel chain. Most painfully, in 1985, Pan Am sold its entire Pacific route network to United Airlines, losing profitable routes to Tokyo, Hong Kong, and other Asian destinations. These sales provided temporary cash injections, but hollowed out the airline's route network, the very thing that gave Pan Am its competitive advantage. Each sale made the airline weaker, less attractive to passengers, and more vulnerable to the next crisis. Then came December 21, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103, a 747 named Clipper Mate of the Seas, departed London Heathrow, bound for New York. Just 38 minutes into the flight, a bomb hidden in a radio cassette player exploded in the forward cargo hold. The plane disintegrated at 31,000 feet over Lockerbie, Scotland. All 259 people aboard died, including 190 Americans and 35 students from Syracuse University returning from studying abroad. The explosion also killed 11 residents on the ground. The Lockerbie bombing wasn't just a human tragedy, it devastated Pan Am financially and reputationally. The airline faced hundreds of millions in legal settlements and safety fines from the Federal Aviation Administration. Passenger confidence evaporated. Many travelers actively avoided Pan Am, fearing it remained a terrorist target. The bombing exposed security failures and shattered the airline's carefully cultivated image of reliability and prestige. Pan Am limped into the 90s, bleeding money. The airline was losing approximately $3 million every single day in its final weeks. The 1990 Gulf War crisis pushed fuel prices higher, further straining finances. On January 8, 1991, Pan Am filed for bankruptcy protection. Delta Airlines purchased Pan Am's remaining transatlantic routes, its Northeast shuttle service, and other valuable assets for $416 million, while also investing in a reorganized version of Pan Am that would focus on Latin America and Caribbean routes from a Miami hub. For a brief moment, it seemed Pan Am might survive as a smaller carrier. The restructured airline relaunched on November 1, 1991, with about 60 aircraft and 7,500 employees. But the resurrection lasted barely a month. Revenues fell far short of projections, losses continued mounting, and confidence collapsed. Suppliers demanded cash upfront for fuel and catering. Aircraft lessors repossessed planes. Competitors hired away the remaining experienced staff. The airline's creditors calculated that Pan Am needed $100 to $200 million just to continue operating. with 25 million required immediately to fly through the next week. Nobody was willing to provide it. On the evening of December 3, 1991, Delta withdrew its financing commitment. The next day, Pan Am ceased operations forever. The final flight, number 436, landed in Miami carrying passengers who would forever be part of aviation history's most melancholic last chapter. In the end, Pan Am's collapse came down to a lethal combination of factors. The airline's lack of domestic routes left it structurally vulnerable after deregulation. Its massive investment in jumbo jets backfired when fuel crises and economic downturns hit. The costly National Airlines acquisition added debt without solving fundamental problems. Asset sales provided short-term cash, but destroyed long-term value. The Lockerbie bombing delivered a reputational blow from which the airline never recovered. Management struggled to adapt to a deregulated, brutally competitive environment where yesterday's prestige meant nothing if you couldn't fill seats profitably. Pan Am has been revived multiple times since 1991, but each attempt failed because the world that created Pan Am no longer exists. The airline thrived in an era of regulated routes, limited competition, and international travel as exotic adventure. Modern aviation is about efficiency, domestic connectivity, and ruthless cost management. These were never Pan Am's strengths. Today, the blue globe logo remains one of the most recognized symbols in the world. Delta operates many of Pan Am's former routes. The 747, Pan Am's crowning achievement, has finally ended production after more than 5 decades, and thousands of former employees still gather to share memories of when they worked for the world's most glamorous airline. Pan Am didn't just disappear. It represented the end of an entire era. The airline that made the world smaller, that turned international travel from fantasy into reality, that pioneered innovations still used today, simply couldn't survive in the world it helped create. Sometimes, the very qualities that make you great become the forces that destroy you. Pan Am's story reminds us that dominance is never permanent, that even giants can fall, and that yesterday's visionary can become tomorrow's cautionary tale. The world moved on, but for those who experienced it, Pan Am will always represent something lost, a time when flying meant something more.